This is Jerome Cabanatan, creator of Tree vs. Fox, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Jerome Cabanatan about his Kickstarter comic, Tree vs. Fox. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. If you want to help the site and the podcast, please consider supporting the effort by chipping in at ko-fi.com/TrueNorthCountryComics. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. Based in Ontario, Jerome is a full-time Taekwondo coach and instructor, a make-the-time cartoonist, and most importantly of all-the-time husband and daddy. He started making comics to help instruct his after-school program at Toronto's Young Chung Taekwondo Academy to ignite the learning addiction in his students, the same way comics and cartoons drove him towards martial arts and its myriad of life lessons. He has currently written, drawn, and self-published 2 graphic novels and a rhyming Dr. Seuss-style ABC book under the Tree Kids of Troop 44 title, is in the process of happily making more. Inspired by old martial arts flicks like No Retreat, No Surrender, Shaolin vs. Wu-Tang, and Best of the Best, as well as classic 80s comics like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Lone Wolf and Cub, and the all-fight epic Destroy, Tree vs. Fox combines Jerome's lifelong obsession with high-level martial arts with lessons learned during quarantine from working on the notorious fan project Image Grand Design to create the fight comic you never knew you wanted. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Jerome Cabanatan about his Kickstarter comic Tree vs. Fox. So, Jerome Cabanatan, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
No problem, my pleasure.
I appreciate your time. Before we get started with all the questions, though, I want to ask you, what's on your bedside reading table? What are you reading today?
My bedside reading table is actually a lot of comics that I read with my kids. So luckily, one of the things that they do like to read is Tree Kids of Troop 44. It's my graphic novel. I think they think it's cool that Daddy wrote a book. So I have that, and a lot of Archie, Sonic the Hedgehog. That's for them to read. There's like some Star Wars comics, but a lot of words and pictures, a lot of stuff for kids. If it's myself, just finished reading an Alan Moore run on Swamp Thing.
Nice.
I'm trying to get into New Gods, the Jack Kirby stuff. It's so cool to look at, but there's so many words that I'm kind of losing it. But I am really enjoying looking at it and just being inspired by one of the greats, right?
Absolutely. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, we're here talking about your latest Kickstarter project, Tree vs. Fox. I wonder if you could talk a bit about the story and maybe what inspired you to create it.
Tree vs. Fox, it's a follow-up to Tree Kids of Troop 44. And it's about like a group of tree kids. So the tree creature kids, they're thought of as lesser beings in this universe. When they enter this martial arts tournament, which they're not supposed to do because they're trees, they get to prove to everybody that they're more than what people think. They're more than what they think. And the whole story started off as a way to just showcase the martial arts values that I try to show every day, and a fun way to show like the techniques and the philosophies and the mentality of somebody that does martial arts, to make the weak strong, to make the shy confident, to make an enemy a friend, like that kind of thinking. That was where Troop 44 started. And Tree vs. Fox kind of continues that, but my idea was inspired by Scott McCloud's Destroy, Lone Wolf and Cub, like 80s black and white comics where it was just like big, long fights. And I wanted an excuse to do that. So Troop 44 was a little bit more, how do I say this? It was a little bit more instructional, while Tree vs. Fox, I get to have more fun with the action and with the words, just talk about my feelings and my outlook on the martial arts attitude and how that lifestyle works with anything in your life. So if you wanted to have just a fight comic, then it's a good fight comic. But if you're a martial arts enthusiast, you'll probably get something a little bit more out of it. So I think it would be good for all levels.
Great. Good. Well, in the write-up I was reading about on your Kickstarter, it says you were inspired by old martial arts movies, which are fantastic. But I'm wondering, what was it exactly that you saw in those films that you put into the book?
What I find with fight comics in general, a lot of times it's just trading shots and trading blows, and it's not as intricate when it comes to choreography. So something like an old kung fu movie, like an old Shaw Brothers kung fu movie, that's always what inspired me was the choreography of the fights. If it's not just the flashy jump kick or the fireball or whatever, but the way the moves flowed with each other and the way the moves fit, those are the things that I enjoy about sports, about martial arts, and seeing sports and martial arts in comics. I think especially like with American comics, I think sometimes that gets lost in lieu of a really, really, really rendered pretty picture. And I'm more about like the motions in between the panels rather than just the panel itself. And that's kind of what I was going for, was to be more intricate with the choreography. That's kind of what stuck. So not any particular character or scene. It's just the general choreography with all the fights. I think that's always what sticks into my head more than a character's name or something. That's just the way my brain's wired.
Sure. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Fight Comic, and that's what the book really is. But when talking to other creators and they want to do similar fight scenes, it does take up a lot of space and a lot of time to do well. So I'm wondering,
Yes.
how do you get around that? Do you plan out the entire story with thumbnails and say, okay, I know it's going to take X number of panels to do this properly? Or how did you work through it?
With Tree versus Fox, no page was done the same. I didn't do any of the pages in order. There was like certain spots that I wanted to have happen. So sometimes I would draw that page and then I would draw another page with another spot. And then as I filled in the pages, I got to draw the pages that filled in between and kind of connected the two. So that was one way. The final part of the fight in Tree versus Fox, I drew all the panels on separate sketch cards, and those are actually available as original art as part of the Kickstarter as well. But because I worked mainly digital, I wanted to have something real and tangible. So what I did was I drew each move just off the top of my head. Like I wanted to have that same feeling of a fight, and I wanted to put it onto paper. I drew all the panels separately on separate cards, and then I scanned them in, and then I put them onto the page digitally, and then I arranged it from there for the last part of the fight. I'll work within a page when it comes to a fight. I'll usually have an idea of some kind of initial clash, and then what do I want to be as the ending. Again, with my own martial arts training on top of the number of different kind of fight media that's in my head, with the number of the sports that are in my head, and just general imagination when it comes to martial arts, I'll fit the beginning and the end together and then go on to the next page. And that's something that I think I've been known for. I have a small following that knows the Jerome comics are generally fight comics or like gag joke comics or one or the other.
Cool. Now, you just touched upon making physical cards, and
Yes.
that's one of the incentives you have. I wonder if you talk about some of the incentives you have for this particular Kickstarter. What's on the go?
For the Kickstarter, starting from the bottom, let's say I have the digital comic pack. And while most Kickstarters will have the digital version of the physical comic, which I do, I'm also putting the digital version of Tree Kids of Troop 44. Right, to give a background, if you want, you don't really need to read it to enjoy Tree versus Fox, but if you want to, you have all 248 pages there. I also have the ABCs of Haya, which is like a children's book version of that universe. Again, very martial artsy. It's about trying, failing, and trying again in an alphabetic rhyming book, similar to a Dr. Seuss book. So it's 3 different ages, same universe, but that's the digital comic pack. There's the physical book, 44 pages of black and white, homage to all the 80s indie books. I also have a commission tier where I will either do something digital, or you want something on a 8x10, like, or on a comic backing board. I'll draw whatever you want. I also have original art tiers, which includes sketch cards, the sketch card panels. So you can get a piece of like real Jerome original art, and then you can say, oh, I know that panel. It's on this page. I'm also offering my quarterly comics anthologies, Black Belter 1 to 4. They're my comic anthologies. They're what keeps me accountable for all the other comics that I make. It's like my Mad magazine. So it's all my strips, shorts, one-offs, gag strips, autobio, parody. I'll put all those in there. And I'll also have One Stone Number One, which is my action comic that I'm serializing with Next Panel Press. It's an online comic syndicate that we have web comics every Sunday, just like your Sunday paper. But One Stone goes up there every 2 weeks, and One Stone Number One is the collection of the first 24.
Nice. Lots of good stuff there, that's for sure. Now, we've recently met up at a variety of different events, and mostly in libraries. You were at the Whitcalf one. Unfortunately, I didn't make it to the Whitcalf Comic Arts Festival, but we were at the Toronto Public Library. And just want to ask you the value of libraries in your mind. Like, I know that certainly it's a less expensive way for creators to get their tables out there for people to see. But what do you think in general libraries mean for people who are creators and people who want to get into comics? What do you think?
I think libraries are the best thing. They're already established as a place that promotes reading of any kind. They've already established the importance of words, established the importance of books. I think events that are in libraries will always gather the kind of fans that I would like, the fans that want to read, that want to be immersed in the world, rather than just something to cosplay or get a cool t-shirt. Not to say that I'm against cosplay or cool t-shirts, but from an indie point of view, I think the libraries are really important to get yourself out there and to get yourself connected to readers or to fans that actually read. I'd like to be able to work closely with as many libraries as possible, get my books in all those libraries and promote literature and reading and art, which is everything that comics is. So it's having someone pushing your stuff without trying to sell your stuff. It's one of the most purest things that I think can be given to a creator, is someone pushing it just for the merit of it being good. And I think that's something that libraries do and libraries promote, and I hope they continue to do. And I hope more libraries see the value of not just comics for other people to read, but how comics help people express themselves, especially kids.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. No, we've been talking about your Kickstarter project, Tree versus Fox, but I'm wondering, do you have any other upcoming projects that you can talk about?
I'm on a couple of fan projects. So one is about the old Image Comics 1963 that didn't ever really get finished. And me and a group of people, we're just trying to finish it up in the way that we want to. Not for any monetary gain, but that's just something that we'd like to put out there. I have a quarterly anthology. That's usually the main thing that I am working on because it's a whole bunch of things. And the consistency of getting a page done all the time is actually what's helping me improve the most as a cartoonist. It's not just big project by big project, but I'd like to work by like page by page. So every quarter I have a small collection just as a nice benchmark for myself. I had to put on hold, so after Tree versus Fox, I restart another book that I'm working on. It's a silent comic. It's an adventure comic it's for kids. The working title is Sword and Scooter. It's about a little boy and a little girl that are basically trying to save their parents that got kidnapped by a ghost and a Sasquatch and a bunch of other monsters, and they have to work together. That's a fun book that I kind of put on hold because of Tree versus Fox, but I think now I'm in a better headspace for that. So keep a lookout on that. If people want to find anything more that I'm actually working on, I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/JeromeCab. I have a bunch of stuff working on there. Oh, and I can't believe I forgot this. I do have a book out now. It's a children's book. It's called The Adventures of Team Brain. It was written by Tara Grotto, a good friend of mine. She's a parenting coach, and it's about emotional regulation and the things that happen in a child's brain before they have a tantrum.
That's a lot of stuff you have in the go. You mentioned you have a Patreon page, but do you have any other places that you recommend people go to find out more about your current and your future work online?
I'm pretty active on Instagram. So Instagram @JeromeCab. You'll pretty much see me either showing my work or promoting work that I've done or promoting where I'm going to be. That's kind of my go-to social media. And then I've link trees and everything like that. And it's just people want to get in on it, like get in and get the comics sent to them. Then that's people that get on Patreon. But if it's not like I'm not going to show my stuff on Instagram either, it's just, it's going to be later and you don't get stuff. Right.
Right. Right. Well, Jerome, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Other than maybe back to Kickstarter, Tree versus Fox, I have the early bird special. It finishes on December 2nd. I'm not sure if by the time this goes out there, if anybody would catch it, but yeah, trying to get that down so I can start showing some more things.
Thanks to Jerome for the chat. You can discover more about Jerome on Instagram at JROAMCAB. And you can discover more about Tree vs. Fox on Kickstarter. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Tumblr at True North Country Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. And if you want to help the site and the podcast, please consider supporting the effort by chipping in at ko-fi.com/TrueNorthCountryComics. Your patronage is always greatly appreciated. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.